In the quiet winter of 1980, the body of 19-year-old Barbara Mae Tucker was found brutally slain on the outskirts of her college campus. For over 4 decades, the case was cold, until a discarded piece of chewing gum and the relentless pursuit of justice uncovered a dark secret that had been buried for years. Barbara Mae Tucker was a vibrant and driven 19-year-old who had a promising future ahead of her. A sophomore at Mount Hood Community College in Gresham, Oregon, Barbara was pursuing a business degree with aspirations that extended far beyond the classroom. Known for her tall, athletic build, she was a standout in sports, having competed in national basketball competitions and earned several awards for her abilities on the court. Barbara was also an avid artist with a deep love for creativity. She spent her free time sewing, knitting, crocheting, and even writing poetry and music. She had dreams of opening her own craft supply shop one day, combining her love of business and the arts. Little did anyone know that her life would be tragically cut short, and the small college town of Gresham would be left searching for answers for decades to come. On the evening of January 15, 1980, Barbara was on her way to a night class. Barbara had plans with a friend to grab ice cream after her consumer credit practices class, a small reward after a long day of learning. As the evening set in, Barbara made her way to campus, unaware that danger lurked nearby. After her class, she was seen heading toward the parking lot, intending to leave for the night. But something went terribly wrong. It was there, in the darkness, that Barbara's life was brutally taken from her. The next morning, on January 16th, students began arriving for their classes at Mount Hood Community College, unaware of the grim discovery that lay ahead. Near one of the parking lots, in a wooded area between Kane Road and the campus, something caught the attention of a group of students, a sight so out of place that it drew them closer. There, partially hidden among the bushes, was the lifeless body of Barbara. She lay on the cold ground, her clothes disheveled, her books and purse scattered nearby, as if abandoned in a hurry. The horror of the scene was undeniable. The tall, athletic young woman, who had once been so full of life, was now a victim of a brutal assault. Police were called, and soon the area was swarming with investigators, each one trying to make sense of the tragedy that had occurred. The college grounds had become a crime scene, with yellow tape marking off the area where Barbara had spent her final moments. As authorities carefully examined the scene, the details of the slaying began to paint a chilling picture. There were clear signs of a struggle, with dirt covering her clothes and skin. This suggested that she had struggled against her attacker in a desperate attempt to survive, but was tragically overpowered. The medical examiner determined that she had been beaten severely, with blunt force injuries to her head that were so catastrophic they collapsed one of her eye sockets and fractured her skull. These brutal injuries were found to be the cause of her demise. As investigators quickly worked to find out what happened to Barbara, detectives combed through every inch of the area, looking for any clue that might lead them to her assailant. But despite the horror of the crime scene, concrete clues were scarce. Witnesses reported seeing Barbara running into the street near the campus on the fateful evening. She frantically waved her arms as if trying to flag down help. Unfortunately, they assumed it was a college prank. Some witnesses even saw a man leading her back into the wooded area, but descriptions of the man varied, making it difficult to identify a suspect. Investigators also found 3 large pools of blood near where Barbara's body was discovered. The blood was type O, matching Barbara's blood type. Drag marks in the soil nearby indicated that her body had been moved, likely dragged from the place where she was initially attacked to where she was later found. One of the most significant pieces of evidence was the discovery of male DNA inside Barbara's body and on a towel that had been draped over her by someone who found her. This evidence would prove critical, but in 1980, DNA technology was not advanced enough to make a definitive identification of her attacker. Instead, the case hinged on more traditional investigative methods: interviewing witnesses, following up on leads, and trying to build a profile of the perpetrator. The investigation dragged on for years, with detectives revisiting the case repeatedly. The lack of clear evidence or a strong suspect kept the case cold for decades, despite the best efforts of law enforcement. However, the clues they had, Barbara's injuries, the blood at the scene, and the male DNA found on her body, remained preserved in evidence, waiting for the day when science could finally catch up and provide the answers that had eluded investigators for so long. In 2000, the Oregon State Police Crime Lab analyzed the DNA swabs taken during Barbara's autopsy. They created a profile that, while incomplete, marked the first step toward identifying the unknown perpetrator. But it would take another 2 decades and the emergence of genetic genealogy to unlock the true potential of this evidence. In 2021, a genealogist from Parabon Nanolabs, known for pioneering work in using DNA to solve cold cases, took on Barbara's case. By uploading the DNA profile to a public genealogy database called GEDmatch, the genealogist was able to trace familial connections, slowly narrowing down the pool of possible suspects. This painstaking process led to the identification of Robert Arthur Plimpton as a likely contributor to the DNA found at the crime scene. At the time of Barbara's case, Plimpton was a 16-year-old living less than 1.5 miles from where her body was discovered. The connection was chilling. A young man from the same community who had lived in proximity to his victim but had gone unnoticed as a suspect for decades. With Plimpton identified as a person of interest, Gresham police began to surveil him. They watched his movements closely, waiting for the opportunity to collect a fresh DNA sample that could confirm the match. That opportunity came when detectives observed Plimpton throw out a piece of chewing gum. The gum would become the critical piece of evidence that finally tied him to the crime. When the DNA from the chewing gum was compared to the profile developed from the 2000 DNA swabs, it was a match. The same DNA that had been left at the scene of Barbara's brutal slaying all those years ago was now traced to Plimpton, conclusively linking him to her violent end. This breakthrough was monumental, not just for the detectives who had worked tirelessly on the case, but for Barbara's family, who had waited 41 long years for answers. In June 2021, 60-year-old Plimpton was arrested. He had lived much of his life in relative obscurity, but as investigators began to dig into his past, a darker picture of his character began to emerge. Plimpton had a criminal history that included a conviction for second-degree kidnapping in 1985, just 5 years after Barbara's life was taken. He had also faced charges of DUI, parole violations, and, in 1997, allegations of attempted sodomy and assault. Though these charges were ultimately dismissed, they painted a disturbing portrait of a man with a history of violent behavior. Despite this past, Plimpton had managed to evade suspicion in Barbara's case for decades. He had lived his life, got married, and had children, but the breakthrough in DNA technology had finally caught up with him, and there would be no escape from the evidence that now pointed squarely at him. Plimpton was charged with first degree in connection to Barbara's case. He pleaded not guilty, maintaining his innocence despite the overwhelming DNA evidence against him. His defense team argued that there was reasonable doubt. They questioned the reliability of the eyewitness accounts and suggested that the DNA evidence, while compelling, was not enough to definitively prove his guilt. The trial, which took place between February 26th and March 15th, 2024, was a bench trial with Multnomah County Circuit Judge Amy Baggio presiding over the case. The prosecution laid out a meticulous case, presenting the DNA evidence that had led to Plimpton's identification and highlighting the similarities between Plimpton's history of violence and the nature of Barbara's slaying. One of the key moments in the trial came when Judge Baggio reviewed the DNA evidence linking Plimpton to the crime scene. She noted that the match between the DNA found on Barbara's body and the DNA from Plimpton's discarded chewing gum was incontrovertible. Even with the defense's efforts to cast doubt on the case, the scientific evidence was too strong to ignore. In her ruling, Judge Baggio expressed no doubt about Plimpton's guilt. She stated that Plimpton had assaulted and beaten Barbara Tucker to her violent end. Unfortunately, despite the evidence of assault, Plimpton was not convicted of that part of the crime. The prosecution was unable to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the assault had occurred while Barbara was still alive. Even so, the conviction brought a measure of closure to Barbara's family, who had waited so long for justice. Her sister, Susan Potter, spoke of the deep pain that had lingered for years and the relief that came with Plimpton's conviction. She said, "Just not giving up. We always had hope. At one point, we thought he had lost his life. Maybe it would never be solved. I just wished it could have happened when the rest of my family was here, especially my parents." Detective Aaron Turnage told them he would not rest until the case was solved. He had the following to say: "I promised Susan I was going to solve this case. If that means working around the clock, that is what happens. There has been lots of hurdles, and sitting down and experiencing that with the family last night is something I have never experienced in my career. It is pretty awesome." While nothing could bring Barbara back, the knowledge that her assailant would finally face the consequences of his actions provided some solace. Plimpton remains in custody in Multnomah County, awaiting sentencing. His conviction on first-degree charges ensures that he will spend the rest of his life behind bars, unable to harm anyone else. In 1996, a young woman's life took a horrifying turn when her car broke down on a quiet Midland County road. What seemed like a stroke of luck, a stranger offering help, quickly morphed into a nightmare as she was abducted and assaulted in an isolated field. For decades, the crime went unsolved, the attacker vanishing without a trace. But nearly 30 years later, advancements in DNA technology broke the case wide open. In the days leading up to the crime, 18-year-old Nicki Tripple was like any other young person navigating her daily life. Living in the quiet rural expanse of Midland County, Michigan, she was preparing for another evening at home after a long day. The weather was typical for January, cold and potentially hazardous for travel. On the night of January 7th, 1996, she set out to drive home, likely expecting the ride to be uneventful. But as she traveled along the isolated roads, her vehicle experienced a mechanical failure that left her stranded and alone in a sparsely populated area. At that moment, the man who would become her assailant drove by. He was a stranger, seemingly arriving as a good Samaritan, offering his assistance. He presented himself as a concerned individual ready to help, which, in her vulnerable state, seemed like a stroke of luck. She accepted his offer, trusting his appearance of goodwill. With the car pushed off the road and the immediate danger of being stuck behind her, she was given the option of a ride home. The man's offer appeared to be a straightforward act of kindness, one that the woman gratefully accepted. Little did she know, this act of apparent generosity would soon turn into a horrifying nightmare. Instead of taking her home, he drove her to an isolated field in a remote part of the county. There, he brutally assaulted her, a horrifying betrayal of the trust she had placed in him. After the attack, he instructed her to get dressed and then drove her back towards the road. As they drove, the sight of approaching emergency vehicle lights triggered a desperate attempt by the man to evade detection. He stopped the car, allowing the traumatized victim to escape. She ran to her home, where she immediately told her mother about the assault. Her mother, in turn, contacted the police. Nicki was quickly taken to the Mid-Michigan Medical Center emergency room, where she was treated and an assault evidence kit was collected. Despite these immediate actions and the evidence gathered, the investigation faced a major setback. No suspect was identified at that time, leaving the case to grow cold as the years went by. The assault evidence kit collected was meticulously preserved, but without a suspect to match it to, the trail hit an end. Throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s, law enforcement continued to work on the case sporadically, but the lack of progress and the passage of time made the prospect of solving it appear increasingly more difficult. The victim, meanwhile, faced the profound impact of her trauma, struggling with the lasting effects of the assault, while the case against her attacker seemed to drift further into obscurity. By the 2010s, technological advancements in forensic science began to offer new possibilities for old cases. But even with these advancements, the case remained unsolved as the detective team faced the daunting task of piecing together long dormant clues. The assault kit sat in evidence storage, and for nearly 2 decades, the investigation seemed to be at a standstill. In 2016, a wave of hope surged through Michigan as the state launched a project dedicated to examining long-neglected assault kits, including the one tied to this cold case. The Midland County Sheriff's Office, in collaboration with state resources, sent the decades-old evidence kit to Sorensen Forensics for analysis. It was a turning point. Sorensen Forensics was able to extract a full male DNA profile from the sample collected back in 1996. This profile was immediately entered into the state of Michigan's Combined DNA Index system in early 2018, but even with the promising development, no immediate matches were found in the database. The case was on the brink of another end until Detective Brent Benzing of the Midland County Sheriff's Office decided to explore the rapidly evolving field of genetic genealogy. He arranged for a groundbreaking analysis with Parabon Nanolabs. Parabon's researchers tapped into the growing database of GE match and family tree DNA, both of which have special programs that allow law enforcement access to their data for investigative purposes. By building extensive family trees from distant DNA matches and conducting meticulous descendancy research, Parabon's team managed to trace the suspect's lineage back to the Midland area. Through a careful process of elimination and investigation into physical characteristics like eye color, Detective Benzing and his team identified a likely suspect, Douglas L. Weber. In July 2022, Benzing met with Weber under the pretext of an interview at the Law Enforcement Center in Midland. During this interaction, Benzing obtained a buccal swab of Weber's DNA, authorized by a search warrant. The sample was sent to the Michigan State Police Crime Lab, and when the results came back, they confirmed what the detectives had been hoping for: a match with the DNA from the 1996 assault kit. 59-year-old Douglas L. Weber was arrested and charged with first-degree criminal conduct for the 1996 case. This arrest marked the culmination of years of painstaking investigative work and offered a glimmer of justice for Nicki, whose ordeal had remained unresolved for nearly 3 decades. In the months leading up to the trial, Weber faced significant legal challenges. His defense attorney argued that the crime did not reflect his client's character, citing Weber's lack of similar criminal history. Despite these claims, the gravity of the evidence against him remained overwhelming. The DNA match, along with the detailed investigative work, painted a clear picture of Weber's involvement in the crime. On December 6, 2023, Weber pleaded guilty to third-degree criminal conduct as part of a plea agreement. In exchange, the prosecution dropped the more severe first-degree criminal conduct charge and an unrelated charge of assaulting a jail employee. This plea deal spared Weber the possibility of a life sentence, but still carried significant consequences. The sentencing hearing took place on April 4, 2024, before Midland County Circuit Judge Michael J. Beal. During the hearing, a statement from Nicki, now in her 40s, was read aloud. Her words conveyed the profound and lasting impact the assault had on her life, detailing years of trauma, anxiety, and diminished self-worth. Weber, appearing in court wearing a medical mask, faced the victim's testimony and expressed remorse through his defense attorney. He acknowledged the harm he had caused and requested forgiveness, although his words did little to mitigate the severity of his actions. Judge Beal sentenced Weber to a prison term of 5 to 15 years, with credit for 519 days already served. Weber was also ordered to register as an offender. The sentence was a bittersweet resolution for Nicki Tripple, offering a measure of justice while acknowledging the profound and enduring scars left by Weber's crime. In the quiet corridors of a Westminster hotel, a brutal crime was about to shatter the calm. On February 5, 2018, Treeanna Nichols, a 22-year-old woman was found lifeless in her hotel room, a victim of a vicious stabbing. As the Westminster Police Department grappled with the devastating crime scene, an elusive figure caught on surveillance footage would become the focal point of a harrowing investigation that would span years. On February 5, 2018, Treeanna Nichols checked into the Westminster Quality Inn and Suites in California for what was intended to be a brief stay. She was alone, having arrived in Westminster with plans to settle into her room for a short time before continuing with her day. Little did she know that her evening would be tragically cut short by an unknown intruder. Around 3 p.m., surveillance cameras captured a man of significant build entering the hotel. He was wearing a gray hooded sweatshirt and dark clothing, holding a silver vaping device. This same man, seen walking with purpose, made his way up the stairs to the second floor, where Treeanna's room was located. The footage showed him pausing briefly, vaping as he climbed the steps. Shortly after, he left the building, his presence at the hotel no longer detectable by security cameras. Later that evening, around 10:56 p.m., a hotel clerk contacted Westminster Police, as her family was unable to reach Treeanna and was concerned for her safety. Responding officers arrived at her room and made a grim discovery. Treeanna had been stabbed multiple times. Her life violently ended in what appeared to be a savage and personal attack. There was no sign of forced entry, suggesting that the assailant might have known Treeanna or exploited an opportunity to enter her room. The brutal nature of the crime and the suspect's sudden appearance and disappearance left investigators with few immediate leads. However, the released surveillance footage and the DNA evidence collected from the scene became pivotal in piecing together the sequence of events leading up to Treeanna's tragic demise. As the investigation continued, police focused on identifying the man captured in the footage, hoping that this elusive figure could unlock the mystery of Treeanna Nichols' untimely and violent demise. The investigation into Treeanna's violent end quickly faced significant hurdles. Despite the clarity of the images in the footage, identifying this individual proved difficult. The footage showed him briefly on the second floor, near Treeanna's room, but did not reveal any specific details about his identity or motive. The initial leads from the footage generated a few tips, but none were substantial enough to crack the case. With Treeanna's family and community eagerly awaiting answers, the Westminster Police Department intensified their efforts. They reviewed the surveillance footage repeatedly, scrutinizing every detail, from the suspect's movements to his attire and vaping device. DNA collected from the crime scene was submitted to the Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, but it yielded no matches, leaving detectives with a significant void in their investigation. This setback was particularly disheartening, as the evidence at hand, though crucial, was not enough to lead them directly to the suspect. Realizing the need for advanced forensic techniques, the Westminster Police Department turned to Parabon Nanolabs, a company specializing in genetic genealogy. Parabon's team, led by Chief Genetic Genealogist C.C. Moore, was tasked with analyzing the DNA sample. Their approach involved creating a detailed genealogical profile using an extensive database of genetic markers, which included public records and social media information. But even with the advanced technology, initial results from Parabon were inconclusive, offering only general insights into the suspect's ethnicity and regional ancestry. The breakthrough only came over a year later when a match was finally made. A crucial DNA connection identified the suspect as Arian Vito Smith, a 26-year-old from Westminster. Once the match was confirmed, Westminster police moved swiftly. They obtained search warrants and conducted surveillance on Smith to confirm his involvement. This stage of the investigation was meticulous, focusing on verifying that Smith was indeed the individual captured in the surveillance footage and connecting him to the crime scene. In May 2020, armed with a solid case and the results from Parabon's DNA analysis, the police arrested Smith. The arrest was a culmination of years of dedicated work by the Westminster Police Department and Parabon Nanolabs. Smith was charged with Treeanna's slaying and held on a $1 million bail. The investigation continued as authorities pieced together the details surrounding the crime and Smith's connection to Treeanna. On March 8, 2024, Smith pleaded guilty and is awaiting a sentencing date.